Hi everyone, this is Jake from Snow CC doing a quick video for you today on how to win or maximise your chances of winning in Zwift races. So I haven't been doing too much proper racing recently. This is a recording of my first race back in B category last week after I got demoted. And first and foremost, you should always make sure you're spinning the wheels with about 10 seconds to go. So make sure you're spinning up, you've got the power flowing through the wheels, and just put in a little surge to move towards the front of the group as you cross the line. As you can see, we did that here on the first part of the lead-in. This is a fairly small race with about 26 riders or so, which means we've got a pretty good chance at getting a win or at least a podium if we play it correctly. We'll be racing in the Evo CC Sprint Series race, which is 2 laps of Watopia Seaside Sprint, which is around 15.4 kilometers, which equates to about 22 minutes, something like that, depending on the pace of the group. So this is nothing new, but the start is the most important part of the whole race. You can't win it at the start, but you sure can lose it. Be prepared to work harder here than any other point in the whole of the rest of the race. This is where everyone's jostling for position and trying to form a selection. If you get dropped from the front group within the first 5 or 10 minutes, it's basically game over. You're never catching back on. You'll be fighting for whatever place you're in, and you won't get any higher than that. It just means that you have to use every last watt that you've got to stay in the front group for as long as possible. If I drop off the front group in a race, I am literally dead. I've got nothing left. I'm completely cooked, and I'll likely just go at a very, very easy pace for the rest of the race itself. As you can see here, we've already got several riders that are quite far off the back, and they're not coming back. It's we're 1 minute into the race, and those riders are it's over for them. You've got to do everything you can, as I say, to stick in the front of the group. And what you can see here is I try to stick at the back of the peloton as much as I can to save as much energy as is possible. And the only times I'm not doing that is when I'm moving up. So you can see gaps start to develop at the front here, and you just want to sort of fight those fires as they come up, close those gaps, just move up the group a little by little, make sure that there's no gaps between the front of the race and you. So you'll probably find that as the race progresses, especially over the course of the first 5 minutes, a few people drop off at the back. So you want to be super careful the first 5 minutes of just don't get caught behind anybody that's going to get dropped, that lets the wheel go. Make sure you're going past them, you're closing that gap yourself and just sticking at the front. So as you can see here, the lead into this is also the finish of the race. So we hit a slight incline in a minute, which is about a 30-second incline, which is quite steep. Goes up to about 7 or 8%, I think. That dips down into a descent, which then goes across a wooden bridge for the finish, sprint finish, to the banner line. So we're going to get a good look at this, the finish straight here, at least twice before we hit it. So I know this route quite well, but even if we didn't, you do get a nice look at it, which is good. And it's just the same as any Zwift race, which is you've got to be careful of the parcours. You've got to know what the route contains. Is it flat? Is it hilly? Here, I know that it's pretty much flat, other than that steep little rise, which we're just about to hit here. And then you do a little bit around the volcano as well, which amps up for 30 seconds or so. But really very little climbing here. So it's important to just stick in the group, try and do what you can, and make sure you're pushing a little bit on the inclines, because as in any Zwift race, in any category, that's where you'll find people put in accelerations, people put in attacks, bursts of speed, bursts of power, and that's just to test the people that are hanging on at the back. They just want to try and get rid of as many people as they can, which makes sense. If you're not a sprinter, you need to get rid of as many people as you can before the sprint finish, whereas obviously the sprinters are going to try and sit in at the back, use as little energy as they can, and hold on for the finish. So it just depends what kind of rider you are in terms of what you're trying to do, but the premise and the basics remain the same, which is do as little work as possible, draft as much as you can, and be prepared to work when you know there's likely to be accelerations, and do everything you can to stick in. So that's what we're going to do here. And it's very well known that Zwift races are, very, very hard for the first 5 or 10 minutes. So you're going to have to, without question, work at the top end of what you can do for those 5 or 10 minutes. Probably above FTP. It's probably going to hurt, but it's going to hurt for everybody. Everybody's going to be suffering. Everybody's going to feel like they're going above FTP. and it will die down. I can promise you that after 5, potentially up to 10 minutes, the pace will go out of the group. It will ease up, the speed will go down. It's just natural. It's everybody's very excited at the start of the race to try and get into the front of the group. It's, as we've been over, it's very, very important to be in the front. So it's just a case of everybody wants to make sure they're there. But this isn't a level that anybody can sustain for the whole race. If they could, they'd try and get off the front and stay away. That in itself, very, very difficult to do, especially with a group this size of 20 people. You'd have to be a very, very, very good rider, and probably way better than the category you're in, to be able to stay away from a group like this for 20 minutes. It's just very, very tough. And as you can see now, we're hitting the slight descent after that little rise and across the bridge. And this is the point where the pace goes out of the group and it just settles down. So, you have to work hard that first 5, possibly 10 minutes, especially in a crit race where it's a short race and everybody's desperate to hang on. And as you'll see here, the pace on this is, I think we were doing 48 kilometres an hour the first couple of minutes on the flat, and we're here and we're only doing 42. My numbers are significantly lower than they were, and you can actually get away here with recovery. So I'm doing pretty much 3 watts per kilo, just under 3 watts per kilo for big stretches here, which is, in a B category race, that's really, really good for recovery, and will just keep you from going into the red. The longer you can keep from going into the red or too far into the red, the more that's going to serve you later on in the race. So what we're going to do here is, as we approach the volcano, we'll make sure to, as we've said, try and push a little bit on the incline, make sure no gaps open. In case anybody gets dropped off the back, we want to be at the front. So we're very, very close to the climb here as we're approaching the volcano, and we're just going to try and go as easy as we can without getting dropped. So just using as little energy as possible, but as I say, be prepared to put in a little bit of burst. You are going to have to go harder on the hills. There's no way around it. Everybody else is going to be going harder as well. So there's really no way to not do that. But just, you don't have to go harder than you need to. You'll see when we hit this climb in a second, one guy goes off the front and he goes quite early. Nobody reacts. I definitely don't react, and I'm not concerned about it because he's got such a long way to go. Even if he manages to get a 20-30 second gap on this incline, which is unlikely as short as it is, he's then really, really going to struggle to keep that away. So don't panic this far out. Just keep your eye on the pack, look at what the pack's doing. If it's 1 or 2 riders trying to break, let them do their thing, burn their energy off. Just sit in the draft, sit in the group will catch them, you will be fresh, you'll have saved your energy. So yeah, we're just bursting a little bit harder here to stick at the back on that little incline, out the saddle, a little bit of a push just to stick within contact. You don't have to be at the very, very front, you don't have to close every gap like within 1 metre. Just make sure they're not opening up more than, say, 5 metres. That should be your reference point, really. If it's more than 5 metres, just move up a little bit, as we're doing there, towards the front of the group. And the pace is gone. As we said before, you get to the top of the incline and everybody just eases off. So this bit of the flat inside the volcano is very, very tame. The power goes up a little bit here, as does the incline, but again, nothing too out of the ordinary. And we'll just go around the volcano here, sat in. It's very, very difficult to get away. Like I said, the only thing you've got to be worried about is getting dropped. So all you have to worry about is not being at the back, but making sure you're closing the gaps as you do so. So what we'll do now is we're going to go around the top of this little incline and head around the dirt descent on I think a -2, -3%, very, very gradual little descent, and we're just going to try and sit in there for as much as we can until we get around to the first incline we did. So I'm going to fast forward now, try and save as much energy as possible, and we'll see where we are in about 5 minutes. So here we are back at the first incline that we saw on the lead-in, and it's just a case of trying to get up it as we did at the volcano with as little effort as possible while still staying in touch with the group. So I'm pushing there, doing just over 5 watts per kilo to stick with the group. Nobody's really getting away, everybody's sort of doing the same sort of similar pace, bumping it up a little bit there just to make sure we get over the crest of the hill with the front group and there's no real big gaps. As soon as we do that, and you can see we hit the -3%, I just completely ease up on the power, start doing 2 watts per kilo. I'm very, very light. I only weigh about 60, 61 kilos most of the time, so I'm happy to let the heavier riders here just sort of drift ahead of me and do the work for me. I'm very used to falling to the back of groups on descents. If you are a lighter rider, you really do need to be careful of that. The amount of times I've been dropped on descents way outnumbers the number of times I've been dropped on the climbs, especially in a big group like this when you're doing big efforts and you're trying to push to stay in. So it's really, really important that you don't stop immediately as you crest the climb if you're a lighter rider, and make sure you keep pushing till you're in that group on the descent. And conversely, if you're a heavier rider, you will obviously have to push harder on the incline, but you can ease up a little bit more on the descent, whereas the lighter riders can't. They're going to have to keep pushing. So if you're lighter or heavier, you do have an advantage and disadvantage. I know it doesn't feel like it. It's just a case of trying to use your advantage or disadvantage as best as you can. So we made it over the top of the incline there and across the bridge, so we got a good look at the finishing straight, and that's what we're going to tackle when we do the third time around at about 6k. So we're going to realistically have to start thinking soon about how we're going to tackle this, how we're going to tackle the finale. It's unlikely we're going to get dropped before we get there unless the pace on the volcano is really, really high. So you have to start thinking about what your best way of winning is, and obviously for everybody that's going to be different. It completely depends on your power profile. If you've got a good 15-second sprint, you can afford to sit back, gamble, try and save as much energy as you can and wait for the sprint finish. But if you do that, obviously you're going to be dependent on things like luck, timing, positioning, all of those factors when other people decide to go. Some people aren't going to let you go to a sprint finish. Then they're going to realise that they can't beat you, or they can't win a sprint finish with 15-second power. So that their only opportunity is to go early and to not give you the chance at a sprint finish. So it really does depend. If you've got a good 2-minute power profile, I'd suggest going from a couple of kilometres out, because it catches people by surprise. Everybody looks at each other. Nobody wants to chase. Everybody's thinking about the sprint, trying to save their energy. Do they want to chase you with 2k to go and then potentially not have the pop in the sprint? I guarantee you that most of the time people are going to look at each other. Nobody's going to do anything. And if you're strong enough and bold enough and brave enough, you can get away there and you can win it. There's nothing a sprinter, somebody like me who's happy to sit and wait for the end, there's nothing I want to see less than somebody breaking with 2.5-2k's to go, because I know that it's not in my hands anymore. If it comes to a sprint finish and there's 10 of us, it's in my hands, isn't it? What I do in the sprint will determine if I win. But if we're only fighting for second place because somebody got away with 2.5k to go, there's nothing I can do about it unless I work to bring them back. And then you see the disadvantage of I'll have nothing in the sprint. So even if you don't have a sprint, you have options. The best bet is to always try and catch people by surprise, because that's when people are going to look at each other and make them make difficult decisions, make them think about it, make them have to gamble. You'll see when we get to the finale here, I had 2 options and one of them was kind of ruled out for me. I always like to gamble on my sprint, but if it looks like somebody's going to stay away, you have to take things into your own hands or think about a plan B, and that's what we'll see in this finish here. It's not your typical sprint finish. My hand was kind of forced, so really does depend on the power profile you've got, what kind of rider you are, how confident you are, how much you've got left in the tank. If you feel like you've only got a tiny bit left, maybe save it for the sprint. That's what I do as a lazy sprinter. I try and save. If I only think I've got 5% energy left or something ridiculous, then I'll try and save it all for the sprint where I'm going to need it. But if I feel good, if I feel strong, if my legs are feeling okay, you might want to test them on an incline. You might want to try that attack from, say, 1k to go or a little bit earlier, and just make people make these difficult decisions that they don't want to make, especially when it relies on them working together, because nobody wants to work with anybody else when you get to the final 2k of a race. Nobody wants to put in any effort that they don't have to. So you can really, really pay off when you gamble that way, if you're brave enough. Not quite what we do today. We don't quite go from that far out, But we're going to fast forward a little bit as we get to the top of this volcano, and we'll go to about 1.5k to go, where I can let you know what my thought process was, why I made the decision I made, and what I did wrong. So we'll have a look at that now, and we'll fast forward to about 1.5k to go. So now we're into the final 2k, and this is the danger zone really. This is where you've got to be super alert, looking for people going off the front, trying to decide if it's worth you closing it down or sitting in. As we can see here, the first person goes off the front with about 1.6k to go. The gap isn't massive to start with, and as I said, everybody kind of looks at each other, nobody wants to chase, and that gap just sort of gets bigger. I'm not too concerned yet because it's only one rider, and we've got that incline where I know my 1 minute power is really strong, and I know I can really smash it up there if I have to. But ideally I want to wait for the sprint. As you can see there, another person goes across, and then it looks like a third and a fourth rider are starting to do it as well. So I realise here I'm going to have to at least move up to the front of the group and make a decision very, very quickly about what we're going to do here. And that gap doesn't look to be coming down to me, to the rider at the front. There's 3 riders ahead, so if we stay in this group, we're essentially sprinting for 4th. They might come back, especially with that little incline, but it's a gamble, and it's a gamble going, do you want to wait for the sprint? Well, if we can sprint for 15 seconds or you've got a 1 minute power, it gives you either option. And as I'm about to decide here, I think I'm going to have to launch it early with about 0.9k to go. So my companion app didn't work. This is not the way you want to deploy your power up if you can. Catch. So it's a very good weapon to have in your arsenal, that 1 minute power there. And all I can say is make sure that you have your celebration ready. You don't look like a complete tool like me trying to make it up on the spot, and ideally have something looking cooler than that ready to roll. So those are your options, and it's just a case of trying to play it right. You're not going to get it right every time. There are definitely going to be moments where you try to gamble and lose, but it's just about trying to use the weapons you've got at your arsenal as best as you can. We'll do another video soon, one with a longer climb, where we can look at how to race different styles of race, specifically those that aren't crits. So thanks for joining, see you next time.